Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Welcome along, Wednesday Night Rugby. Very happy to say Niamh Briggs is on with us once again. Hey, Niamh.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Very well, and it's been a while. Matt Williams, hello. You're welcome back to the show.
Hi, Joe. Good to talk to you again, mate.
We're sort of in no man's land. Heineken Champions Cup here and Six Nations a little bit far away there, so I'll probably try and do a bit of both is the general plan this evening. It was the Six Nations launch day this afternoon. The headline news, Niamh, from an Irish point of view, is everybody seems to be pretty much fit, which is great. The only doubt is Ian Henderson. Other than that, Joey Carbery is fully fit, we are hearing. He has been in contact training for a couple of weeks now. He will be going to the Portugal training base from tomorrow. Also fit for the Wales game, Tadhg Furlong, James Ryan, Josh van der Fleer, Jordan Larmour, and anyone else you care to mention. Ian Henderson not even ruled out yet, just a doubt. It's almost rare a coach gets this lucky.
Yeah, I was just about to say it. I think it's great. I think, while the game's been suspended or cancelled with COVID, was tough on the players, and it also gave them time to make sure that they got their bodies right. That 3 or 4 week gap allowed them to probably clear up niggles, so that they're coming into the Six Nations camp now with 2 or 3 games in a row, which was something we've not seen probably since November. And I think it's brilliant. I think for Andy Farrell, it's just great for continuity for him and his coaching ticket. I just think that the evolution of where they're going now, that's the most exciting part. I'm really, really excited for the Six Nations because I felt that the Novembers were really good, but you still kind of feel that there's still a lot of growth and development within the squad. So it's hugely exciting.
Matt, from Joey Carbery's perspective, he finished the All Blacks game in November. He was man of the match against Argentina. He had a very good game away to Wasps on that day where he got injured, and we haven't seen him since. That's the really exciting one for me. Another Six Nations and one more closer to a World Cup without Carbery getting game time would have been such a waste. So that's the real boom for me.
Yeah, and in that time, Joe, he just really seemed to really blossom and get his confidence back again, which was really wonderful. I think that kick against New Zealand from a long way out was absolutely fantastic for him. I think people forget one of the big problems you have when you have long-term injuries are psychological. I'm not suggesting Joey's psychologically weak or anything like that. Just every player, when you come back from a major injury, it's the self-belief that your body's going to hold up in the contact. And sometimes that takes months. So especially I've seen some players, some great players that I've coached in the past, take a long time for that to recover. And I think Joey had recovered. It's just such a shame he got injured again. But you're right. He'll get game time off the bench. I imagine, as you just said, everyone being fit, that Sexton will start. Joey will be on the bench. I hope he starts against Italy, and he'll come to the end of the Six Nations with a fair bit of game time. Because, Joe, I think I said to you the other day, I saw a stat that Sexton's game time up until last week was 25 minutes since the November Internationals, and Joey's was only a little bit better. Don't quote me, but it was around 40-minute mark, 45 minutes, something like that, but considerably lower than where we'd all like it to be. But sports science being what it is these days, these guys will come in very good physical condition. It's just their mental and state that a game time provides you with. In other words, that self-belief of being in the saddle and doing the yards.
Niamh, I think quite a few positions pick themselves in this Irish team, certainly for the Wales game anyway, and then after that we'll see where form is and everything else. But Ian Henderson is a doubt. Say he's fit for a moment. Tadhg Byrne, his form just seems like you can't ignore it at the moment. I mean, he's been the one consistent performer for Munster, Lions tour under his belt. Every time he plays at the moment, he catches the eye. I mean, this is his peak. This is it. How far away is Byrne from nailing down starting position for you?
Oh, I think he's nailed on. I am not sure that you can ignore a player in that form. You're 100% right. I said it the other day that I really feel like there are moments in players' careers where they just seem to push on to another level, and I think that's him. I think he's obviously gone away with the Lions, and maybe he's learned a huge amount, but he seems to have come back in incredible shape. But also he's just taken his actual game to another level in terms of, we always knew he was very good on the ball in terms of his ability to poach. But also now we're seeing him running really good lines. We're seeing him distributing. I think that he's nailed on, and I think that it's a case between James Ryan and Ian Henderson.
Where are you, Matt, on it?
I'd be sitting alongside Niamh with that one. I think he's really improved. But so is Henderson. Up until he was injured, I thought he was immense. And James Ryan, sadly, is the one that hasn't had a lot of game time. Now we know what James is capable of. What a nice problem to have, and for the Irish selectors. You look through that whole side, apart from 9 and 10, and probably at 9 you got it a bit. There are real dilemmas on and depth in every position, which is a great thing for Irish rugby. I would think, going back to points that I said, that if you've got Henderson for multiple weeks, that Byrne is the one that's put in the second row straight away. He's got runs on the board, he's fit, he's got game time, and you would move him in there. He acts as another back rower, and that would allow that back five to be, a very dynamic back five. It also means if they select what we imagine they'll select, which is the Leinster front row with James Ryan, with Byrne, with the Leinster back row, that's a full pack that has come through the Leinster system. And if you then go to the back line, if Lama gets picked, you might only get one player in the starting 15 that's not a Leinster player, which is quite extraordinary. And then they'll go to the bench. Sheen and Cian Hooley as well will be there. There'll be it's a very strong Leinster leading pack, and that means we hope that they'll be playing that same brand of wonderful rugby that Ireland played in the November internationals. So, we're only speculating on that, but with everyone fit, and if we look back at November, that's where we go, and Byrne would get his spot in the starting team for me. Okay.
And the last one, Niamh, James Ryan, after the phenomenal season that was 18, missing out in the lines maybe underlined the general sense that he hasn't been able to quite kick on for various reasons. Where's Ryan for you at the moment?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think he does a huge amount of unseen work. So he's, hits a huge amount of rocks. He makes a lot of tackles. And sometimes, more often than not, you need those kind of players in the team. We also know how good he is as a leader in the line-out. I think, so it's not like he's not playing well. He is. I just think that game's evolving a small bit in terms of, it doesn't really matter now what numbers on your back. Everybody has to have the ability to run and pass and distribute at the gain line. And I think that, if you're looking to differentiate between both him, Henderson and Byrne, I just think Henderson and Byrne offer a little bit more with ball in hand. In saying that, every time Ireland play a match and he comes off the pitch, he's one of the top, ruck arrivals. He's one of the top tacklers, and you can't ignore that type of work, even though it's the unseen and nobody kind of really notices it. I think he definitely still has a huge part to play throughout this tournament.
Okay, well, we'll get into the weeds of that over the next number of weeks. Matt, to take a big view for a moment. So Sexton yesterday, he was asked what are the targets this year, this being a year which involves Paris and London away trips for Ireland, and he said, look, we only got together yesterday, we were going through terminology for different plays, we haven't really had that big conversation yet. So I might ask you the question. Ireland come in here on the back of 8 consecutive wins, on a brilliant brand of rugby in November in particular. Frame this tournament for us. What do we want to see from Ireland results wise, and throw in the New Zealand series as well? I'm asking in the context of, you think back all the way to 2003 where Clive Woodward wanted to see certain markers, a win in the Southern Hemisphere, these kind of things, to feel like they were ready to take on a World Cup. What do you kind of feel is decent or acceptable from an Irish point of view, this Six Nations into the New Zealand Test series?
all those markers are still very, very relevant, Joe, and we shouldn't dodge them. I'm scared because I'm hopeful, and that's usually where everything falls apart. And I'm writing a piece for the Irish Times, and I've gone through 3 sentences and I've deleted it 3 times, saying how hopeful I am, because I don't want to bring the wrath of the rugby gods down on the team. Look, November was wonderful. I actually think it was a massive, massive turning point for the national side, simply by the way they're playing. And I believe the way, if they continue to play that way and they have faith in that, it will lead to success. So if we said, what are the markers? All the home games, they beat the Celts and the Italians at home. Now, let's not make this up. To win in Paris or London will be very hard. If they can get one of those, and I'd be leaning more towards London than Paris, and they can pick up one test in New Zealand, and I would believe it to be the first test when New Zealand are traditionally at their weakest, that would be a magnificent season. A magnificent season for them. Because you look, if they go down and win a series, well, that's off in New Zealand, that's off the roof. But, that's highly unlikely. There's not many teams have done that over the past half a century. You've got to really go back to the French. Wow, I think it was 90. Was it 92? I can't quite remember that magnificent try that they scored in the glorious series. And that's the last time New Zealand lost at Eden Park, So, as an Australian, I see Eden Park as this gallows with, spider webs and things hanging off, because you just go there and you get beaten. No one wins there. So it's a tough season, but therefore that's a season full of opportunity. So to me, the Aviva keep that record going, and they should. One away win against the big Northerners and a win in New Zealand, an historic win in New Zealand, that would be very achievable. I think it's very achievable. It's a stretch, but that would be a great season for the boys.
Why do you fancy London over Paris?
I think the best team in the world at the moment is the French. And Galtier has them right on target. I was reading an article that from Midi Olympic, actually, Joe, on the way home on the plane from when you and I were doing the TV together the other day, and I should have read it on the way there, but I was too tired. But it was basically him explaining his markers and where he has the team and how they're coming into the number of the other marker, of course, for World Cups is not just that win in the Southern Hemisphere against one of the big teams in the South, but also the number of caps your team has coming into the World Cup. And Galtier is identifying that as around 30. So he's suggesting the vast majority of his squad will be touching 30 caps, 20 to 30 caps coming into that World Cup. And he has this very well planned. There's so much depth in that French squad. And to get them where Ireland have them the second game, they'll be tough to, and they've got Italy in the first game, so it gives them a bit of a run out. They'll be tough to throw.
Niamh, where are you in that bigger picture question? And I must say, what Matt outlined there, if that happened, that would be amazing. I'm not even sure if the brand of rugby was decent and Ireland were competitive in all the games. I'm not even sure if they lost in London and Paris and lost all 3 in New Zealand, I'd be that disheartened either necessarily. I mean, these are big markers to shoot at. Maybe you have to shoot at them, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm very similar in my thoughts to Matt. I think definitely they should be aiming for one of those big away wins. And I agree. I think France are just so good at the moment. That game against New Zealand in November is probably one of my all-time favourite games of rugby. I think I must have watched it about 10 times. But they're just incredible. They've so much strength and depth. And all that's going on with their club scene and everything, it just doesn't translate to that national squad. And I think that they're kind of similar to Wales, I suppose. They just seem to have reached a level now in terms of so many good, really good young players coming through, and they've done it so well in terms of, blending them in with so much more experienced players. It's almost like you don't notice them, and it takes the pressure off them and gives them a role to play, I think. And I think, for France, it's so good. I think England are beatable. I really do. I think that Ireland have a really good chance there to go and win. I think the brand of rugby that Ireland are playing and trying to play, and probably we will see more of it, I'd imagine, going into the Six Nations. But by the time they get to England, I think that's definitely a very realistic goal for them.
Okay. To the short term, and Wales coming to Ireland, Dublin first up. So I think the point doesn't even need to be made now. There's zero correlation between how poorly the regions do and how well the national side does. Once again, we are overlooking Wales, and they are the winners in 2 out of the last 3 years. They denied a second Grand Slam in 3 years at the death in Paris. And Dan Biggar was talking today. He said, we were written off last year. We're coming in here with a swagger. And they have an extraordinary injury list. Alun Jones, Ken Owens, Justin Tipperick, Talupe Faletau, Josh Navidi, Dan Lydiate, George North, Lee Halfpenny, all out. That's 700 test caps between them. And yet, you just can't write them off. They're the most bizarre, scary side, frankly. I think they must laugh at us. I really did. The way, okay, our provincial setup is great and their regions are struggling. They must laugh at the level of hubris here, Matt, and the way we overestimate ourselves. Like, we won our Grand Slam a couple of years ago. They win one and another, and we still write them off and still think, well, look, we'll take them. So I refuse to say anything but respectful things about Wales because they scare the hell out of me. And injuries or not, they'll come to Dublin. They'll do something.
Man, I played a season there with a name like Williams. I should know better than it, but I'm like you, Joe. I've written them off year after year after year at my cost. And, you just got to have great respect for what they do as a national team. You've got to remember last year, Peter Amani got sent off. Ireland were in the Wales game. Ireland were in control of that game up until that point and had played some pretty good rugby in the first half, couldn't hold it together, and Scotland had them completely beaten and threw it away. And then, a bit like this year, they got a number of players back, and they just charged into those last 3 fixtures. Obviously, beat Italy in the dying seconds in Paris, and didn't come away with the goods. But they've got an X factor as a national team. There's no two ways about that. So that injury list you just read out is really extraordinary. So for them to come to Dublin next week and win, they'll have to be at their best. I think Ireland are overwhelming favourites without seeing their final selection, the Welsh final selection. Ireland would be overwhelming favourites to take that game. But, how many times have we got it wrong with the Welsh? And Dan Biggar's right. They will come here with nothing to lose, and that's when they're pretty dangerous. So I think Ireland are well and truly favourites, but let's pay the respect that the Welsh have earned. We have to be very, very cautious on that first game.
Yeah, I mean, I thought when Gatlin went, it might dry up, but then last year made no sense, and yet there they were at the end going for a Grand Slam. I always remember Niamh reading Sam Warburton's autobiography recently, and this kind of stunning thing at the end where effectively he apologises to Cardiff fans and says, look, it was always about Wales, and that was just the priority. And that's an Irish provincial player could never make that admission in their autobiography, even if it was true. It just wouldn't be allowed. So that was an amazing insight into how they feel, literally publicly.
Yeah, and I think that's just a representation of where they are in terms of their regional and club sides. I think they're just so poorly run, the background so under-resourced at times, and they're so hit and miss that there's just literally no consistency. But I think they're trying to get all their big players back. Obviously, Liam Williams is coming back to Cardiff. I saw that Scarlett signed Vita today from New Zealand, next New Zealand player. So they're obviously trying to bolster up their club game, but realistically, it's even hard to commentate on it because there is no consistency in them. Like some weeks they put in good performances, then the following week they're literally just almost tackle bags. They have no interest in playing, and it's a really weird thing. But when they come in underneath that emblem of Wales on that red jersey, they just seem to find another spark. But I agree with Matt. I think Ireland have to be overwhelming favourites. I just don't, and I'm sure that nobody will thank us from inside the camp. But when you lose leaders like Alwyn Jones and Ken Owens, they're irreplaceable for me in terms of their ability around the pitch. And like last year's Six Nations, it was kind of almost, this sounds, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but it was a little bit almost laughable because it was like the luckiest Six Nations ever, because they were so poor for huge chunks of it and yet managed to eke out so many wins. And I think Ireland will have learnt a huge amount from that in terms of, okay, look, we had them on the rack and we really should have won that. But yes, they're always going to be in there. They're always going to be in the game. So we've got to be ruthless in everything that we do.
Yeah, I feel like the lads just got their headline. Enjoy those tweets from Wales, Niamh, over the next 48 hours. It's going to be fun. So we've touched on France. We don't need to overly elaborate, but just one question, Matt. So Dupont, Intermac laid low with COVID. It seems Dupont would have played the Cardiff game if it had gone ahead and is due to play against Racing this Saturday, so he'll be back up to speed by the time Ireland play them, certainly, and they've got a soft landing with Italy. The only question hanging over France is one of psychology. So they've been building, they've given the various young players experience, and yet they haven't actually got over the line yet. So do you think there's a chink there somewhere in the French psychology?
Interesting one, Joe. They're actually, the French national side are spending part of this week in Perpignan with the French Foreign Legion. And I saw a clip where the Foreign Legionnaires turn up in their traditional gear, which is a big beard, an axe and a leather apron. So whether Fabien Galtier is agreeing with you and seeing a chink there and wants to do something about it, I'm not much of a fan of that, doing that sort of stuff, but they're obviously going there for something to do more psychological than physical. They have lost a number of games in the last second. They threw away the game against Scotland last year. They threw away the second test and a series win against Australia again after full time. Both of these after full time, and in the last second in the old November internationals during the COVID when they played England, they led at Twickenham for 79 minutes and threw it away in the last minute. So you've got to say there is some recidivism there as far as not getting the knife and grinding it or putting the foot on the throat and finishing it off. But that's what a young team will do to you. Young teams are inconsistent. They break your heart like that. But the talent and the quality of this team is self-evident. And I do believe this is their year. I do believe their time has come. We can't prove that. I haven't got anything here to throw it at you and guarantee it. But you look at the way they've played, where they've come and the journey they're on. And the draw. They've got a good draw. I think this could be their year for a Grand Slam. You know what, Joe? If Ireland aren't going to win it, and Ireland could win it, but this is the tough year for Ireland with England and France away. I do hope France win it, because I think it'd be wonderful for world rugby. It's wonderful for Northern Hemisphere rugby, because the French are going about their business back to the way it used to be, which is beautiful, uplifting and different. It's different to the way the rest of the world's playing. And that's great. Different is good. We need, so we need diversity in society. We really need in our rugby. We don't need everyone in the world playing the same way as the bloody Kiwis. We need something different, and France are really providing that.
Needless jab at the Kiwis, notwithstanding. That's absolutely true. 12 years, no championship as well. I mean, for the Six Nations, France being back is very important. Niamh, just one question on England then, and then we'll return to the club rugby before we sign off. Eddie Jones is talking very publicly about this being his third team. He took the World Cup 2015 bunch, and around 2018 or so, he rebuilt another team, and they kind of died a death in the last 18 months or so. So this 2022 marks the beginning of a new team. He's on the record as saying that, and it's all with the World Cup in mind. So a big part of his plan was to have Owen Farrell at centre, marshalling Marcus Smith, and Jones was really talking about that being very, very important in his mind. So Farrell is now out of the Six Nations, freak accident to training. He's going to need ankle surgery. He's gone for 10 weeks, and no Owen Farrell. George Ford, who I suspect was feeling a bit sore, has been called back into the squad. Johnny May's injured as well. Tuolagi's 50-50 for the tournament. So this is going to be such a fascinating Six Nations to see how Jones puts this together. Marcus Smith at the helm, undoubtedly. Yeah, I kind of back him. And I don't think he even cares how this Six Nation goes all that much.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that they're kind of in a bit of almost like a mid-cycle of recycling their team, if that makes any sense. I think that they're parachuted a lot of young guys in there, the likes of Alfie Barbary's having an unbelievable season for Wasps. You will no doubt see the likes of Alex Stramband, who's ripping it up for Harlequins at the moment, and Marcus Smith. He's just so electric. I watch Harlequins every weekend because of him. He just, the way he plays, it's almost like he has so much time on the ball, no matter how much pressure you put on him, and his ability to find space is incredible. So yeah, look, it's going to be different. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a little bit away from, I suppose, the traditional England that we would have seen, I think, from the last couple of seasons. I think that centre partnership is going to be huge. Do they put Henry Slade in there at 12? Do they put someone like Atkinson from Gloucester in there? And none of them had the kind of physical prowess or that kind of leadership style that Owen Farrell has. So you're expecting somebody else to lead the back line from that perspective. And I just think, Freddie Stewart is in. I think he's incredible as well. So they have loads of exciting players. It's just now about trying to get them up to speed to international rugby at the most. And I just wonder, is this kind of Six Nations, has it already been decided, okay, whatever the results, we're just going to learn as much, grow as much as we can, so that as we come into next year and like the summer, November's, we're in a much better place in terms of our strength and depth.
Yeah, because Jones makes eyebrow-raising decisions, Matt. Like George Ford is 28. He's going to be around to the next World Cup. If we've Johnny Sexton, they could have George Ford. So he's thinking in all these different ways. His record suggests, come the next World Cup, we'll look back in hindsight and say, geez, he did it again. He got it right again, Eddie Jones.
To the Six Nations, or the tournaments Eddie's been involved with 2 years out, they tend not to win. It's exactly what Niamh described. And I think they will do that. They'll blood people, they'll give time. But then the next year, if you remember, Six Nations 2019, day one.
Dublin.
Dublin, that's when he was ready. So, look, Eddie's got the best record of any coach in the history of the World Cup of getting teams ready. He's been an assistant coach and won it. He's made the final with Australia and made the final with England. It tells you the guy knows what he's doing. So it'll be, and you can't legislate as a coach for injury. He may go back. Look, Eddie, you've got to understand Eddie's background. He came through Randwick, where they always played what we would call a 5'8", an out half, at inside centre. So they played two out halves. He went through with a wonderful guy called Lloyd Walker, who was a beautiful Indigenous player, and Lloydie would play at 12 as a distributor. So that's why he likes that one with Farrell. Now, if he hasn't got that, he may very well go back to playing a power 12 if Tuolagi's fit. He may very well go back to putting Tuolagi and Slade there to Slade to do the talking with Smith and to guide him through. I think Slade's a very smart player. He could play Slade at 12, and I agree with you, that's a possibility. So we'll have to wait and see with that. I would also suspect on the reverse side, Marcus Smith sort of surprised him, or certainly surprised me, and he's a beautiful player. I love watching him play. But I wouldn't be surprised if people start bringing in some tactics to shut him down a bit. And whether they change the alignment of their defence from out, they start going outside in, things like this, giving the flank at the time off the scrum to go at him, all that sort of stuff, putting a shooter in the line and put pressure on him, which is a Sean Edwards special. Sean Edwards, over the years, as defensive coach of France, before he was defensive coach of Wales, he would quite often let someone just come out of line and really pressure the 10, make them pass early. So I think that's a really interesting subplot as we watch the Six Nations go through, because there's no doubting the young man's talent. He's really got it. But he's going to, I think we spoke about James Ryan, he might have the second-year blues himself at some stage if people start figuring a way to make him play a little bit deeper behind the game line.
We're talking here with Matt Williams and Niamh Briggs. Our rugby coverage here on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. We'll have loads of Six Nations talk over the coming weeks. A quick backward glance at the Heineken Champions Cup and where we are. Niamh, I'll come to you on the Wasp performance in a moment. You were covering it for us live here in the show. Matt, though, just you haven't been on amidst all the Van Gran announcements and just a general, I think, unhappiness with his imminent departure, and the performances at Munster at the time of his announcement weren't good. So it all kind of bubbled up, I think, and became quite emotional. As the coach here in the conversation, an outgoing manager, or a lame duck manager as he'd be called in football for sure. Do you subscribe to that concept? Do you think this is really not a good situation when a coach is going and everybody knows he's going, or can it work okay?
I don't think it's ever a good situation, Joe. It's not what everyone wants, for sure. And my take on the players is, is they like Johan and they respect him and they see the work they've done. But players are human beings too, and I think that really unsettled the team. And Stephen Larkham going back to coach the Brums, you can't help but be unsettled by that. The performance against Connacht wasn't anywhere near what Munster expected their players. So, yeah, I think the whole thing has been very, 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 very unsettling for the team. And it'll be very interesting to see what the go-forward is for the rest of the year. So you saw when they played on the weekend, the first half performance was very good. They scored a lot of points. The whole game deteriorated. There was a few long stoppages for injury, and I thought the whole game deteriorated after that. But that's a very positive win. But there's no way you can't sugarcoat this up any other way than you say, 5 months before the end of the season, your head coach and your attack coach are going to other clubs. That's a good situation. It's just not. And I don't think I know that Van Gran and Stephen Larkham will be professional to their bootlaces and give everything they've got until the last second. But you forget, rugby's easy, people are hard. And the people factor within a team when that's happening is difficult to control, and understandably so.
Niamh, what would you say about the performance Saturday against Wasps?
Yeah, I thought there were so many positive aspects to it. I think it feels like from the outside that they're really binding together to kind of block out this outside noise that they've been talking about. But I thought it was so positive in terms of they tried to move the ball away from contact. We looked at their lines of running. I think that it just looked like that they wanted to play with pace and tempo, and I thought that the crowd played a huge part in that as well. And maybe we've underestimated how important the crowd can be to a team in terms of being able to. It was almost like they were willing them to move the ball, and like any time the ball even went half past the middle of the park, the crowd was screaming for Zebo, like literally, like get his hands on the ball as often as he could. I thought it was a huge step forward, and I think that's a really positive thing. I thought there were so many good points. I loved the last Scannell try. I thought it was so well worked. We've not seen a huge amount from starter plays from Munster, but to be able to go off the top and Hodden appealing out and hitting Casey behind the back, and then Farrell runs a half loop and hits Crowley, who just puts Zebo through a gap. But not only that, I think it was the next two phases were so important. Scott Buckley had a brilliant carry and then really go past from Casey over the top to Scannell. We haven't really seen much of that, and I think that that's a big positive for them. Like, their defence was brilliant and it was so good. They put a huge amount of pressure on Wasps. I think it was like 70 minutes into the game before Wasps even looked like they get their hands on the ball. Literally, it was just wave after wave of attack. And I know it's not going to happen every game, but I just think that from a Munster point of view, from a supporter's point of view, every week since that Connacht game, we've seen, improvements all the time. And maybe we, a big thing for me too, and I was really talking to Quinny about this the other day, is the consistency in the team selection over the last 3 weeks, bar a player here and there. Those players were playing week in, week out with each other. Majority of them, when they played that Connacht game, were coming back from COVID issues. And I think people underestimated that too, to be fair. Okay.
Well, we'll watch that space. Probably good timing for all concerned into the Six Nations to sign off on that performance. And before we go, we've already talked a lot about Leinster and Connacht on Monday Night Rugby. So just Ulster I want to touch on. Mad place, obviously on Saturday you were trying to get back to watch the Ulster match. I don't know, did you get a chance to see it against Claremont? But big picture, Ulster, they're very, very excited. I mean, I think they're eyeing up Toulouse's scalp and beyond at this stage. At Munster, they'll swat aside. I think they're banking on a semi-final against Leinster.
Yeah, you go through undefeated and you beat these big names, and the joyous reward is you pull Toulouse. I mean, the way the competition. I know it's in COVID, and I know the organisers have had an absolutely horrific time trying to put a competition, international competition together during this time. But this whole pool system just hasn't worked. I mean, there is no way on God's green earth that is a just reward for Ulster. And, they might be eyeing it up. And I'm not trying to put Ulster down. I think they've played really great rugby and they've taken significant steps forward. But that is not a reward. That's a serious, serious battle to take on. You go down to Toulouse and Stade Roland, wow, that's as tough a joint as it gets.
Yeah.
And Toulouse are angry. Like, I'm talking to you back in France here, and I went up and had a cup of coffee with some old mates there up the road. And mate, they're all everyone is blowing up about what's gone on with Toulouse and how they see stitched up in the tournament. So Toulouse are going to come out like absolutely breathing fire. Now, who they have left after the Six Nations, who's in their team, we don't know. But that's going to be a tough gig for Ulster. And I do genuinely feel for the supporters and the team, because they deserve a much fairer draw than they've got. All the teams at the top. Munster's draw. That's a tough gig too. And poor Connacht. Connacht finally get through and they pull the big brother. It's which they'll probably be quite happy with in one part of it. They're the team that least respects Leinster in the whole competition, so they'll come out. But the way the competition's structured, the teams that did well, not many of them have been rewarded for doing well.
Mm. Niamh, if there's a weakness in Ulster or a chink in Ulster, what is it?
God, I think Dan McFarlane has said it all along this season, is that when they're, favourites or expected to win, that kind of expectation, that they kind of find it hard to live up to it. To be honest, the way they're playing at the moment, they're so good. Their backline attack is incredibly good. They've obviously been rewarded with the likes of Hume, Lowry and Balcon in the Irish squad now, and they'll get a huge amount of confidence from that. But it's also their pack, I think, have been really, really good. I think Jack McGrath coming back into that fold has brought a huge amount of probably solidity back to them in terms of just, what he can do, and he's very good at what he does. And you also have to think that Ian Henderson is going to come back into that as well. So, yeah, look, I just think maybe the mental side, I'm not really too sure, to be honest, because at the moment I think they're playing incredibly well.
Okay. Guys, thanks so much. We will talk again soon. Matt Williams, Niamh Briggs, much appreciated.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.